Many young Christians grow up with this picture of Jesus. Jesus as a comforter, Jesus as a shepherd, Jesus as a friend. And you'll find this Jesus in the Gospels as well, embracing children, calling himself the Good Shepherd, saying he would die for his friends. But the Gospels portray another side of Jesus as well, a Jesus you won't find in a coloring book, a Jesus we don't talk about as much. After all, this is a man who was crucified, and you don't get killed for being a comforter or a shepherd or a friend. There was something else about him, something that so disturbed the status quo that the religious and political powers of his time united to kill him. According to the Gospels, this man, Jesus of Nazareth, was a revolutionary.
Today, Galilee is a peaceful, agrarian region. People of different ethnicities and religious beliefs coexist peacefully. But at the time of Jesus, in the first century, it was very different. It was a hotbed of revolution. For the Romans, this tiny community was the most troublesome region in their whole empire. After the death of King Herod in 4 BCE, Sepphoris became a haven of revolutionary activity. According to 1st century historian Josephus, the Romans sent troops to the area and killed or sold into slavery around 30,000 inhabitants of the city. 2,000 were crucified. The city was burned to the ground. This is the environment Jesus grew up in.
For many young New Yorkers, the city is not an easy environment to grow up in. For every glamorous neighborhood in the city, there are plenty more that are a lot rougher. The old saying is if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, but there are a lot that don't make it. And it's not for lack of heart or worth or talent. Some kids just need a space to feel like they matter, to feel like they belong. For many kids in New York, that space is the basketball court. New York is a basketball town, and for a lot of kids in the city, basketball is a way of life, and maybe a chance to step away from your life for a little while. So if you're looking for a modern-day revolutionary fighting to change the lives of young New Yorkers in the city, check out a basketball court. That's exactly who these guys are. RJ Perovic and Amir Younesi. Along with Robert Embaum, who couldn't make it to our talk, they run a group called the City Hoops.
So the city was founded in 2008 with the idea of creating an environment where kids can use basketball to get to college, to not only get to college, but to graduate from college. And
get to college not just through their athletic ability, but through education as well.
Exactly. So academics and athletics.
The idea started while they were still in college, with the specific goal of giving inner city kids a chance to grow as athletes, but also to become college graduates. And when I asked them, why basketball? Why is basketball so important to them? They looked at me like I was crazy.
I mean, you've decided to devote your life to it, so why?
It's life. I love basketball because it teaches you can learn so much about someone by playing with them for 5 minutes. It's like, I know everything about your character just by seeing you compete.
And you can understand that better when you know what basketball means to New York.
Oh, it's the Mecca, it means everything. You know, just look, if you walk anywhere in New York City, and I say anywhere between a 5 to 10 block radius, you're gonna find a basketball court. There's a basketball court. You look to your right, you look to your left, you're going to see basketball courts all over the place, and there's always a kid bouncing a ball. I think this is the holy ground, for basketball. I believe the crossover had to be invented here.
Yet even though so many young New Yorkers view basketball as life, RJ and Amir saw that distressingly few are able to actually build a life from it.
There's really no guidance in New York City for kids. Me personally, I had the athletic ability, I had the game, but I didn't have the core credits to accept this college scholarship because there's really no guidance. And in New York City, out of the past 3 years, only one kid was able to accept an NCAA Division I scholarship.
Really?
Yeah, because there's no guidance out here. A lot of these kids have the game, have the potential. College coaches love them. They look at their transcript, they look at their grades, and they don't meet the requirements. So
for a city with such a strong basketball culture, that was shocking to hear. And according to Coach RJ, one of the trends that contributes to that is a growing number of people who are taking advantage of New York's talented young athletes.
I think recently it's been more about, in New York City in general, it's been more about these street guys trying to use these kids to make coins for themselves through these shoe companies.
There are a lot of people who claim that they can change your life, that they can offer a way out. But they don't all have your best interests at heart.
Josephus, the famous first-century historian, gave several accounts of impostor revolutionaries who tricked many into thinking they would change their lives. One account tells us of a man who urged people to take their possessions and meet him at the Jordan River. He also promised that at his command, the waters of the river would be parted just like in the time of Moses and Joshua. When the Romans found out about this, they sent soldiers to deal with this impostor who deceived many. The man was decapitated, and his head was put on display in Jerusalem. Another man claimed that at his command, the walls of the city would fall down, and he and his following would take control of Jerusalem. Josephus writes that this impostor acquired a following of 30,000. Roman soldiers quickly dispersed them up, but the impostor escaped. Yet another revolutionary promised a salvation and rest to all who would follow him out into the wilderness, just like Moses. Josephus reports that Roman soldiers were sent against a throng of people deceived by the impostor and crushed the revolution. And in the middle of all this, Jesus brings another revolution, one that would change the world and change people's lives to their very foundations.
A little bit of money.
Coach RJ and Coach Amir know they have an opportunity to change kids' lives, and the City Hoops does everything it can to help make that happen. In addition to all the basketball practices, games, and tournaments, they provide a lot of different academic opportunities, such as SAT prep, bringing in tutors from nearby NYU.
And the last thing that we do is we actually play chess.
Right.
I
was waiting for him to
say
And it's having amazing results.
In 2012, we were very fortunate. We had this one group that actually won the AAU National Championship, and every single player on that team went on to accept the Division I scholarship.
And while there are those who use basketball to exploit New York's young athletes, the City Hoops empowers their kids to use basketball to their advantage.
Yeah, a lot of guys they really don't keep an eye on these kids. They just, in so many words, they use these kids, and we're trying to be different. We're trying to have them use basketball as a vehicle to open doors.
And as they inspire kids to open doors, the City Hoops make sure their doors are always open as well, to provide a space for all kids in their community to feel like they belong.
And our gym doors are always open, so if our team is on the road playing in a tournament in front of college coaches, the kids who didn't necessarily make a team around the city aren't just turned away and on the streets. Our gym doors are always open, and it serves as a safe haven to just kids all over the city.
They're looking to change the game and start something that makes a lasting impact on their community even after they're gone.
Plan so that this program can live longer than we can, because unfortunately we can't live forever. but this program can. And if we can open these doors and have these kids come here and benefit from it so that they can change their families' lives, I think that's paramount.
That's why they do what they do, and they've seen the difference it can make.
It's incredible.
And it's just great to see them grow up, mature. We sent some kids to college. Some have come back to visit, and just seeing that progression of adulthood, you could say, is just fulfilling. Because this is all volunteers, all volunteer based. So, I mean, when somebody comes back and says, "Hey, coach, thanks a lot," I mean, that I'm good for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Coach RJ and Coach Amir are the real deal. They don't do what they do for money. They volunteer their time because they believe you can revolutionize your community by giving of yourself to create a space where people can feel empowered, to feel like they matter. That can change the world. Or as Coach RJ put it,
change the game. I guess that change the game in a positive way so that it can live on.
Jesus chose not to take part in the many religious and political revolutions taking place in his time. Instead, he brought a different perspective. The Gospel of Matthew provides a sort of manifesto of Jesus' revolution that would have been given somewhere in these hills. It is now known as the Sermon on the Mount. For an oppressed people who were weary of constant revolt, Jesus brought a revolution unlike anything they had ever seen. The Sermon on the Mount is essentially Jesus' manifesto. Because we find elements of it in other Gospels, we can know that it's something he would have said many times. But in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus' revolutionary manifesto is given in Galilee, this hotbed of revolution. And almost right from the beginning, Jesus uses a variation on the following phrase 6 times. You have heard it said, but I tell you. This would have been absolutely shocking and even blasphemous to its first-century audience. You see, in every one of these statements, Jesus counters their understanding of the writings of Moses. For that audience, Moses was the ultimate lawbringer, and in that time, there was no separation of church and state. So Moses' teachings covered every aspect of life, all the way from how to worship God to how to gather your crops. And like Moses, Jesus delivers his law on a mountain. And in doing so, he brings a different perspective on justice. One that rejects vengeance, force, and condemnation, and places a revolutionary emphasis on the ideals of mercy, forgiveness, and love. Even going so far as to say that it would be foolish, even perilous, not to put them into practice.
maybe those ideals sounded radical in Jesus' time, but these ideas of mercy, love, forgiveness, not judging, they aren't new concepts to us today. But what would happen if we allowed these ideals to move outside the space of what we admire or claim to believe or what we maybe try to practice in our homes and actually made them pillars of our communities? What would the world look like then? Deep in an office of a former bank in the Flatbush neighborhood of Brooklyn, there's a group taking innovative steps to transform the criminal justice system of their community. Their co-founder and executive director is Rachel Barnard, and the group is called Young New Yorkers.
And Young New Yorkers is a diversion program for 16 and 17-year-olds who are being arrested and prosecuted in New York State.
And before going further into what they do, it needs to be pointed out that New York State is one of only 2 states in the country that tries 16 and 17-year-olds as adults. And the kids that Young New Yorkers works with aren't violent or dangerous, they're just that, kids. Kids that made a mistake.
Who have been arrested for very small things like jumping the turnstile or graffiti or something like that, and are now like wrapped up in a system that they don't understand, overwhelmed. They could be checking out or getting defensive.
And when a young kid gets wrapped up in that system, they quickly find that because they're being tried as adults, their mistake can heavily impact them for the rest of their life.
And if you get a criminal record at 16, a lot of possibilities immediately narrow. You'll have a criminal record for the rest of your life. You won't have opportunities to get college scholarships that other people might have. You won't have access to housing or other social services, and given most of our participants are poor, they need those services. So those sorts of things.
But Young New Yorkers works to provide an alternative by working with the criminal justice system. So instead of jail time or other sanctions, the court gives eligible defendants the option to join a Young New Yorkers program. They refer to them as transformative justice programs.
The first half of the program uses art such as video, photography, illustration and design to explore typical restorative justice exercises.
So using art, Young New Yorkers explores important questions related to the incident that made their kids' court involved, such as what was the moment in which you made that choice? How has it impacted you, your family, your community?
And then looking at that over time. So where might you be in 40 years? Imagine all the extraordinary things that you want to do that you haven't even thought of yet.
And that's what makes art such a perfect medium to explore these issues. Through art, you're able to explore who you are and who you want to be. And for young kids running into a system that they may find frightening or oppressive, Young New Yorkers offers a stark contrast to how things are normally done. One that explores the heart of who these kids are and works to restore their place in the world.
The revolution of Jesus of Nazareth stood in stark contrast to the ones that came before him. The people of Galilee were oppressed. All of their prior revolutionaries had failed them. Then Jesus takes the stage and completely shocks them. Rather than present a call to overthrow the Romans who were oppressing them or to displace the religious leaders who disappointed them, Jesus presents an eternal revolution, a revolution of the heart. In Jesus' time, the Romans had built the greatest empire the world had ever seen, through might and conquest. All for the purpose of Pax Romana, Roman peace. The idea was that peace is achieved through force. In the middle of that, Jesus called people to follow a different path. One that doesn't seek peace through force and aggression, but instead through forgiveness, humility, and love. And this love, even towards those you might view as the enemy, is present in Jesus' revolutionary manifesto from the very beginning. Jesus' opening contrasting statements are simply radical. Murder is not something you do, but something you feel in your heart. Adultery is not an act that you commit, it's something that is conceived in the heart. He continues, building up to his final contrasting statement. Stop trying to fight your oppressors. Stop hating those who've taken your land, raped your women, and enslaved your children. Love them instead. He is the only person in all of antiquity to ever say that.
A radical transformation of how we view people is at the heart of what can lead to change. And as we discussed what needed to change about the criminal justice system, Rachel pointed out that the United States has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of its prisoners.
The majority of them are black or brown. The criminal justice system is the most oppressive system that we have, and I think it's only just coming to light how we're hindering our young people. These are our children, these are our young New Yorkers.
But Young New Yorkers doesn't fight against the system in order to make change. In fact, it partners and collaborates with many different branches of the criminal justice system.
It really surprises me how courageous and open the many different people from the system are to hearing what the young people have to say about the system that is serving their communities. It's pretty wonderful, and that's why we call ourselves a transformative justice program, because we want to shed light on the system itself as much as the young people that we serve.
And transformation happens when you create a space for it. Rachel's a former architect, and she talked about the design of a modern courtroom and the impact it can make.
The architecture of a courtroom, with the judge sitting up at a podium and there being a railing, and then the district attorney on one side and the defence attorney on the other, is not collaborative, and we create a space where people can collaborate, and that includes the young people that are being prosecuted.
And if you're a disconnected youth entering a space that you find isolating, you're only going to feel more detached. So Young New Yorkers creates a space where kids don't feel condemned or judged, but accepted, nurtured, and empowered. Throughout their 8-week program, they explore themes like accountability, responsibility, leadership. And at the end of the program, there's a large public art exhibition designed by the Young New Yorkers participants.
Their most recent project was called Floating Futures, and they created 3 2-scale solitary confinement cells. The first cell held their artworks. The second cell, everyone was invited to float a future for the treatment of youth in Brooklyn and in the criminal justice system.
And it's not just Young New Yorkers doing this. District attorneys, judges, prosecutors were all invited to take part in the exhibit and write down what they thought the future could look like.
So the young people host them, take them through, they're having a conversation with the young person about the young person's experience, and then they're asked to reconsider what could be possible for the way that they're in the system.
Through this space they had a hand in creating, a young New Yorker is able to guide someone who may have normally stood in judgment of them or in opposition to them, and together explore positive paths to a new future. Once they've completed the program, the participant's criminal record is sealed, and the label of defendant, criminal, is gone. In this corner of Brooklyn, there's a different way of looking at justice, where we can see what happens when we're willing to look at someone differently, not being quick to judge or dismiss them, but instead doing something to create a space where people can grow and feel that they matter. What if more of us were willing to do that? What would the world look like then?
According to Matthew, Jesus gave his revolutionary manifesto in a very strategic location, by the Via Maris, the way of the sea. This was the superhighway of that time. It was the road that connected east and west. Travelers of all kinds of beliefs and ethnicities would have frequented this road. Jesus was injecting his message into the main artery of his world, so that anyone, anywhere, could experience his revolution of the heart. A revolution unlike anything the world had ever seen, because according to Jesus, it was not of this world. The revolution of Jesus of Nazareth was not concerned with overthrowing any outside force, be it empires, religions, or powers of this world. His revolution was internal, seeking to overthrow and transform human nature. And in doing so, he claimed to bring an entirely different kingdom to this world, the kingdom of heaven.
In short, Jesus didn't seek to occupy a certain space or transform another. He made a much bolder claim, that he was introducing a new one that can't be defined by the boundaries of this world.
It's interesting to note that Jesus did not go the route of establishing a new official religious system. He didn't claim any worldly title. He had no wealth, no power, no formal education. Instead, his stated life's purpose was to bring, preach, and live what he called the kingdom of heaven.
So what does this kingdom look like? Some people use the term kingdom of heaven to apply only to the Christian church or only to Jesus' second coming. But Jesus himself said his kingdom was something you couldn't see.
In fact, Jesus said that the kingdom was not just a specific place that you could visit, or an event that you could point to. Instead, the kingdom can be in your midst. Another common term the Gospels use to describe this kingdom is the kingdom of God. And Jesus' revolutionary emphasis on love, forgiveness, and mercy showed that these ideals transcended all boundaries, religious, political, racial, or anything else, because they were the qualities of God Himself.
And this kingdom can be experienced anywhere, in anyone's midst. It's introduced any place in which people create a space that accepts, empowers, and loves people, even those that the world might call an outsider or religion might deem an outcast. A space where people aren't judged or condemned or cast out, but loved. Really, truly loved. None of us has much control over the world, but if we were all willing to transform the spaces we do have control over, our minds, our hearts, our homes, our communities, what would the world look like then?